Yo, what is up, guys? It's Cone back here again today with another video. Please excuse the fact that I'm sunburnt to high hell. Spent a lot of time outside, played some hoops, and it was really sunny out. I should have worn sunscreen or something, apparently, so ignore the fact that my cheeks are red as hell and I kind of look like a tomato. But anyways, the topic of today's video is, you can tell by the title and the thumbnail, I kind of just want to talk real quick about James Harden and how great he has been this season, and more particularly his MVP candidacy. He's in a very interesting spot as an MVP candidate, but we'll talk about in a second. First, go ahead, drop a like, drop a subscribe. Your support's been incredible recently, and if you like content like this, please consider subscribing. I promise I won't always look like this, so you don't always have to look at me. But James Harden has been really, really good, and I don't think I have to tell you how good James Harden is. However, it feels like people have started to get more of an appreciation for him this season now that he's off Houston. I don't know if it's just because he was in the same situation for so long that it kind of got stale, but James Harden is playing similar basketball to the basketball he's always played, and people seem to now be appreciating it more, which is something that kind of blows my mind. People are just now realizing how good this guy is. He's amazing. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that he's kind of shifted his role a little bit while he's playing a similar form of basketball. He has definitely shifted his role in terms of being on the Brooklyn Nets. Now, usually when KD and Kyrie are in the lineup, that means he's a playmaker. He has been their point guard. Even if he runs shooting guard, he's handling the ball like a point guard is. Him and Kyrie, there was that whole conversation they had where Kyrie was like, "You're the point guard, I'll be the shooting guard." And since then, they've kind of figured stuff out. James Harden is leading the league in assists. He probably will finish the season leading the league in assists. He's just really good, and his playmaking's always been fantastic. But I feel like now that he has more options to pass the ball to, he's getting more assists, and people are therefore realizing how good his playmaking is. It's always been phenomenal. I don't think that's a question. He's always been a top 5 playmaker in the league. All the like ball hog narratives were always so dumb about him. He's always been great at getting his teammates opportunities to score, and the way that he makes his teammates better is very evident by the fact that he had so many runs in Houston with teams that at points were not nearly as good as their opponents. We could talk about against the Golden State Warriors, where him and Chris Paul pushed them to 7 games, just barely losing after Chris Paul's injury. That was a huge instance of him pushing his teammates to be better. Some of those early playoff runs before Chris Paul got there, where he helped to push teams to, I believe it was 2014-15, where they ended up in the Western Conference Finals, and it was Harden and very little help after they came back 3-1 to the Los Angeles Clippers in the first year that the Golden State Warriors ended up winning the finals. The Warriors are just always Harden's kryptonite, but he's always been good at making his teammates better, not just being good himself. And once again, I think that's something people are just now realizing as he plays on the Brooklyn Nets. Maybe that is because he has better teammates. You could talk about obviously Kyrie and Kevin Durant, but Jeff Green, a player who he did play with last season, is made better by James Harden. Joe Harris gets so many good looks, and he has been lights out like he typically is, just to a higher degree because of the great looks that James Harden gets him. And I think when we look at all of this, his value, his playmaking, we've always known about his great scoring, or I have always known about his great scoring and his great playmaking, but it feels like his playmaking has become the thing that people are really starting to look at, and James Harden has very quickly entered the MVP conversation. Now, he's in a weird spot for a reason that is similar to one we saw a couple years ago, where if you guys remember, there was this guy named Kevin Durant who plays for this team now that helped form one of the most stacked teams of all time in Golden State after the Thunder blew the 3-1 lead to them in the 2016 Western Conference Finals, and Kevin Durant hop shipped to the Golden State Warriors to form a big 3 or 4, I guess you could say at that time, with Curry, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, and himself. Solid role players, Steve Kerr, solid coach, and they were just dominant. No one could really stop them in the 2 years that they won back-to-back finals. Of course, unless you want to talk about James Harden's Rockets that almost did it, but they didn't end up doing it, so no one was able to stop them. Now you have a similar situation here. Maybe it's not as stacked because they don't have that fourth guy like a Draymond Green, but this team is super talented. Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, James Harden. It's a really good squad. You have also you have a great role player in Joe Harris as well. Bruce Brown has been incredible in his role since getting here. Nick Claxton is a really solid player. They're adding Blake Griffin. They could potentially add more guys in the buyout market. I don't think they're really going to add too much more. I think this is pretty much their final roster. We'll see if any buyout candidates do come there, maybe like a Gorgie Zhang or something like that, who recently did just get bought out. Maybe we could talk about an Otto Porter, a Jeff Teague, but I think that for the most part, this is their main core roster. And if they had been healthy all season, I would say there's no way James Harden wins MVP. Because with how stacked the roster is, we saw the same thing in Golden State with that super stacked team. None of them were really ever MVP candidates. Curry and Durant were just never talked about as MVP candidates because their team was so stacked. and therefore they didn't get that consideration. So we look at this Brooklyn Nets team, it's the same case, right? No, not the same case, because James Harden has spent a lot of nights being the only guy of the 3 stars playing with this team. Kevin Durant has missed an ample amount of time, and he's still going to miss more time with some injury. Kyrie Irving is out here and there with some injury. He had that little hiatus earlier in the season. And so James Harden a lot of time has been forced to shoulder the load. And outside of those 3 guys, the supporting cast isn't great. I mentioned Joe Harris and Bruce Brown, guys like that. Jeff Green is a solid player. But DeAndre Jordan isn't nearly the player he once was. Nick Claxton only recently entered the rotation even, and so I can't bring him up as a long-term guy. They've brought in a bunch of different guys. They brought Norvel Pell for a little bit, Andre Roberson. They've been shuffling guys in and out all the time, but the one consistent player on this roster has been James Harden, and he has helped them keep pace with the Philadelphia 76ers, who, credit to them, are keeping pace without Joel Embiid as well. They keep winning games without their MVP candidate in his own right, but James Harden is doing it with less of a cast. I mean, at least in the Sixers, they have Ben Simmons and Tobias Harris, who are playing every single night. But a lot of nights, it's just James Harden as a star player on this team. And so it's not your typical super team situation where we can't put him into consideration, because a lot of nights it's just him. And that's where it comes into the question of, can James Harden win MVP? Obviously, yes, he can. He is a player in the National Basketball Association, so physically he can win MVP. But will he be allowed to? That's the bigger question, I think. When we look at the way that the MVP race is going right now, if you look at the numbers, if you look at team success, the top guys are probably Joel Embiid. You could talk about a LeBron James. You could talk about a Nikola Jokic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and like a James Harden. I would say those are probably like the top 5 right now. If I had to name them, Damian Lillard also somewhere in that mix as well. But Joel Embiid's hurt. He hasn't played for a little bit, and his team's still playing well without him. LeBron James hurt, given his team is not playing well without him. But him and Joel Embiid being out, they were 2 of the top guys before their injuries, if not the top guys before their injuries. And now that they're losing time, that kind of weakens their cases a little bit, especially in a shortened season. And so that opens the door for other guys like a Giannis, a James Harden, a Nikola Jokic. Jokic's team is, I think, 5th or 6th in the Western Conference right now. Giannis's team is 3rd in the Eastern Conference. James Harden's is 2nd, right behind Philly, and a lot of times Kyrie and KD don't play. KD hasn't played in a while, and James Harden has kept them afloat. He deserves a lot of consideration for this award, and I think it's going to be a travesty when he is not given that much consideration, because people are going to say, oh, he's on a super team. But they're not going to look at the games he carried this team. Tonight against the Pistons, I get it. It's the Pistons. They're not very good. But tonight, without KD or Kyrie Irving, 44 points, 14 rebounds, 8 assists. Incredible. Which is nothing we're not used to with James Harden. But this is a whole new situation. This supporting cast is not very good, and he's having to play with so many different lineups, so many different iterations. Like I said, they bring in guys like Norvel Pell, Andre Roberson. They bring in guys randomly. They're trying out different rotations, trying to figure out what would work for the playoffs right now. And every night, James Harden is the constant, and he comes out and he gives you incredible production. He's not scoring the ball? Okay, he'll just dish out 17 assists. He's scoring pretty well. Doesn't matter. He'll still get just barely under 10 or around 10. He'll grab 14 rebounds for you on a night where DeAndre Jordan only grabs 9. He's doing everything for this Brooklyn Nets team. And right now, I think he's top 3 in that MVP race, if not top 2, if not the leading candidate. I don't quite know who's my leading candidate. It gets really difficult because of Joel Embiid and LeBron James' injuries. But James Harden, at this point in time, deserves a ton of consideration for the award. And if it ended today, I think he might win it. That's how good he's been. And that's how much he has carried this Brooklyn Nets team, which is crazy to say, because before the season he wasn't even on this roster. He was having a ton of drama in Houston, and now he's come over to Brooklyn, and he's been nothing but professional. He's worked hard. He's put this team on his back, and he's just having fun out there. And he's been so good to watch. He's so much fun to watch. I know people hate on James Harden's game, but I don't know why that is. Maybe people just hate the Houston Rockets, but I feel like people love James Harden this season. I saw a tweet talking about how James Harden has a good floater. Yes, he's always had a good floater. Like, how did people not realize that? Or how did that person not realize how good his floater's always been? I think people just kind of forgot after last season with Russell Westbrook, and there was the whole Chris Paul fallout, and there was just a lot of controversy in Houston that people forgot how good James Harden is. Maybe it just got stale in Houston, because now that he's in a new situation with new players around him, new coaching, a new role in a lot of different games. He's like a Swiss Army knife. He does so much well. And his defense, which was a joke years ago, isn't even that bad anymore. It's solid. Especially when you talk about the post, he's a solid to good post defender a lot of times. He's just big. And I know there's a whole joke that James Harden is fat or whatever, but he just has a good frame to body up on those post guys. And he does a great job of it. He's so good. I don't have to tell you James Harden's so good. You know that. I don't know why I'm telling you again. But I think right now, James Harden can win MVP and maybe should win MVP. The problem comes with the rest of the season. KD will eventually come back, and Kyrie will eventually find his rhythm and stay healthy, and they won't rest him too much because they do want this team to find some kind of rhythm. They want them to play with each other, especially if they add new pieces before going into the playoffs. And so the question is, when those games start happening, will that weaken James Harden's case? I think the answer is yes. I'm not saying it should, but in the eyes of the people that vote for this award, the people that decide who gets the MVP at the end of the day, it's definitely going to weaken it. So be on the lookout for that, because that's definitely going to happen. Maybe it should. Because you do have to think of it as Kyrie, Kevin Durant, James Harden. That's a crazy stacked team, right? So if they do come back and they do play a ton of minutes together and they keep winning and James Harden's stats do go down, it does make sense for his MVP case to drop. But at the same time, he has played such an integral role to this team. If James Harden wasn't on this team right now, they'd be floundering because Kyrie would be in and out every single night. Kevin Durant has missed a ton of time. James Harden has been the most valuable player to this Nets team, which is second in the Eastern Conference right now. They're very close to having the best record in the NBA. And so I think if James Harden manages to lead this Nets team until KD and Kyrie come back, if he keeps them afloat enough to the point where they take that 1 seed, maybe they even get the best record in the NBA, that might be enough to push him past that section where KD and Kyrie come back. And so I think that's where it lies. James Harden's MVP candidacy is going to depend on how this team performs for the rest of the time until KD and Kyrie come back. And after they come back, does James Harden continue that production and continue to show what he showed was not a fluke or a result of just increased opportunity? Which I don't really think it is. I think he's just incredible. I think he's going to end the season as a top 3 MVP candidate, and if he doesn't, it will probably be a travesty. I'm not saying he's going to win it. I really don't know who's going to win it. Like I said, a lot of injuries, and the fact that Nikola Jokic is surging right now, just carrying the Nuggets on his back, getting a reinforcement in Aaron Gordon will probably do a lot for his team's success, and if his team does keep rising in the seeding, I think it's going to be very hard for someone to beat out Jokic for the MVP award. But I did want to give the shout to how good James Harden has been and how much of an MVP candidate he has been. He played 42 minutes tonight. 42 for a guy that a lot of people say is out of shape. Ridiculous. That being said, that's pretty much all I have to say on this topic. Let me know what you think about James Harden's MVP candidacy. Let me know if you think that he can win the award, or will he win the award when the season is wrapped up. What do you think about the whole topic of he can't win it because he's on a super team? Do you think the fact that he's playing without those players doesn't matter? And if they do end up coming back, how does that affect his candidacy? Say they come back tomorrow. Say tomorrow Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving come back for the rest of the season. Is James Harden's MVP candidacy dead in the water, or does he still have a shot? So let me know what you think about all of that. Once again, apologize that I look like a tomato. Hopefully it'll be done in the next 2-3-ish days that I'll look back normal, but we'll find out. So for right now, I'll see you guys later. Real one, sit back.